Hey, dear members of the Soul Stories family. Today we will bring you a romantic love story. So let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. Chapter 1. A Fateful Collision. That night, the Grand Regency Hotel shimmered with crystal chandeliers, the air thick with sophisticated laughter and calculated whispers. The annual charity auction of the elite wasn't just a place to flaunt wealth. It was a stage for discreet dramas. Claire Bennett, 26, didn't belong here. She was only there to deliver an urgent folder to her grumpy old boss, who'd forgotten it while busy sweet-talking an investor. In a simple black dress borrowed from a colleague in worn-out flats, Claire quietly wove through the crowd, clutching the files like a shield. She didn't notice the man standing near the auction podium, his hand raised with authority. Edward Blackwell, 30, CEO of Blackwell Group, was the center of every gaze. Dressed in a pristine white suit, his black hair slicked back neatly, his deep blue eyes were as cold as ice. He was bidding on an antique emerald necklace, a gift meant to appease his mother's relentless nagging about marriage. The price had climbed to 7 figures and no one dared challenge him, until Claire appeared. 1.2 million, Edward's voice rang out, low but sharp, silencing the room's murmurs. At that exact moment, Claire, rushing through a narrow aisle, tripped over a lady's gown. She stumbled, crashing into Edward. The glass of red wine in his hand spilled over his white shirt, spreading like a bloodstain across a perfect canvas. The room held its breath. A few stifled giggles broke out, quickly snuffed by Edward's icy glare as he turned. "What are you doing?" he snapped, eyes narrowing, staring at Claire as if she'd just ruined his entire world. His shirt was now a mess, wine dripping onto the marble floor. Unfazed, Claire straightened up, lifting her chin. "I'm sorry, but if that shirt matters more than an apology, I genuinely pity your taste in girlfriends." Her voice was sharp, laced with sarcasm, loud enough to draw bigger laughs from those nearby. Edward froze. No one spoke to him like that, especially not in a room full of sycophants. Before he could retort, a saccharine voice cut in from behind. "Edward, are you okay?" Olivia Sinclair, a haughty heiress with golden hair and an expensive silk gown, glided toward him. She shot Claire a disdainful glance before placing a possessive hand on Edward's arm. "Let me call someone to handle this. She clearly doesn't belong here." Edward's brow furrowed, irritation flashing. Olivia had been clinging to him all night, dropping hints about their childhood friendship, and not-so-subtle suggestions of a wedding. He hated it, the falseness, the pressure. Then in a rare, impulsive moment, he did the unthinkable. He pulled Claire close, his arm circling her waist, his voice calm and commanding. "No need. This is my girlfriend. She's clumsy, but I like that." The room fell dead silent. Claire gaped, mouth opening to protest, but Edward tightened his grip slightly, whispering in her ear, "Just one night. Pretend, and I'll pay you $20,000. His tone was low, almost an order, yet his eyes held a flicker of pleading. Claire knew he meant it. She'd accidentally mentioned her hospitalized mother while delivering the files to her boss, and Edward must have overheard. That money was her family's lifeline. She swallowed hard, giving a stiff nod. Olivia paled but masked it with a forced smile. "Really, Edward? Her?" Her voice dripped with doubt, but Edward didn't bother replying. He turned to Claire, gesturing, "Follow me." That night, Claire played the perfect girlfriend. She held Edward's hand, smiled at curious guests, even teased him in front of everyone. He loves controlling everything, but lucky for him, I'm not the obedient type. Earning laughs and a surprised glance from Edward, his eyes sparking with intrigue. She was sharp, authentic, unlike anyone in his artificial world. Olivia could only stand there, gripping her wine glass tighter. As the event ended, Edward drove Claire home in his sleek black Bentley. The night streets were quiet, save for the steady hum of the engine. Claire sat still, clutching her bag, thinking it was over. She'd take the money, pay the hospital bills, and forget this strange CEO. But when the car stopped outside her rundown apartment, Edward turned, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. "You're something special, Claire Bennett," he said, his voice low and certain. "This won't end here." Claire gave a faint laugh, opening the door. "Thanks for the cash, but don't get any ideas. I'm not the type you need." She stepped out, walking away without seeing the rare smile tugging at Edward's lips, a smile brimming with determination. He'd met hundreds of people in his life, but none made him feel as alive as the clumsy girl who'd spilled wine on his shirt. And Edward Blackwell wasn't one to give up easily. Chapter 2. Edward begins his pursuit. The morning after the gala, Claire walked into her tiny office feeling like she'd just woken from a bizarre dream. She still couldn't believe she'd pretended to be Edward Blackwell's girlfriend, the CEO of Blackwell Group, dubbed the Ice Prince by the press, just to cover her mother's hospital bills. She told herself it was over. The money had been wired that night, and that man would surely forget her as quickly as he'd discard a ruined shirt. But she was wrong. At exactly 9 a.m., the office door swung open. A delivery man stepped in, arms wrapped around a massive bouquet of white roses, their fragrance so strong it nearly overwhelmed the room. "Claire Bennett?" he asked, setting the flowers on her desk under the curious stares of her coworkers. Claire frowned, opening the small card attached. The handwriting was bold and precise. "Thank you for last night. I'd like to see you again. No pretending. Edward." She laughed out loud, half in shock, half at the absurdity. "What's wrong with him?" she muttered, crumpling the card and tossing it into the trash. She had no time for a bored rich man's games. But less than 10 minutes later, the desk phone rang. "Miss Bennett, someone's here to see you in the lobby," the receptionist said, her voice slightly shaky. Claire went downstairs, mentally preparing a curt rejection for whatever crazy idea waited. Then she saw him, Edward Blackwell, standing in the middle of her shabby office lobby, still in an expensive suit, this time ash gray, his deep blue eyes fixed on her unblinkingly. He gave a faint smile, the rare kind that made her instinctively want to turn and run. "What are you doing here?" Claire crossed her arms, her tone icy. "The money's been sent. I don't owe you anything." "I'm not here for the money," Edward replied, his voice low and steady. He stepped closer, extending a hand as if to shake hers, but Claire didn't budge. "I'm here for you. Last night, you intrigued me. I want to see you again. No acting involved." Claire blinked, then laughed louder than before. "Intrigued? Were you drunk? Or do you think I'm some new toy to amuse yourself with?" She shook her head, turning away. "Thanks for the flowers, but I'm busy. Goodbye." Edward didn't follow. He just stood there, watching her disappear behind the glass doors, his hand clenching into a fist. Claire Bennett was unlike anyone he'd ever met. She didn't flatter, didn't cower, wasn't swayed by his wealth or status, and that only fueled his determination. The next day, a latte appeared on Claire's desk with a note. "I guessed you like lattes. If I got it wrong, let me know so I can fix it next time." Claire stared at the cup, considered it for a moment, then drank it. Not because she liked it, but because she hated waste. Inside, though, she was starting to feel annoyed. Who did he think he was, barging into her life like this? That weekend, Claire stopped by a small diner near her place, a spot where she often grabbed sandwiches for her little sister Lily. As she stepped outside, a sleek black Bentley rolled by, stopping a few meters away. Edward emerged, no suit this time, just a simple white shirt and jeans, less aloof but still radiating undeniable authority. "What a coincidence," he said, smiling as if this weren't entirely planned. "Coincidence, my foot," Claire shot back, gripping her bag of sandwiches. "Are you stalking me?" "No," Edward said, though his eyes glinted with mischief. "I was just passing by. Saw you, so I stopped." He nodded toward the diner. "I like the sandwiches here, too. What kind do you get?" Claire narrowed her eyes, incredulous at his nerve. "Listen, Blackwell, I don't know what you want, but I'm not someone you can toy with. I'm busy. My mom, my sister, my job. I don't have room for an idle CEO." Edward nodded, not arguing. "I understand, but I'm not playing." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You don't have to trust me yet. I just want you to give me a chance. One chance." Claire didn't reply, turning and walking away, though her heart beat faster than usual. Edward didn't stop. On Monday, a box of macarons arrived at her office with a note. Not a latte, so try this instead? On Tuesday, he happened to show up at the park where Claire was taking Lily, holding 2 ice creams. For your sister, he said, handing one to Lily before Claire could object. Lily, the 10-year-old with bright eyes, grinned wide. Sis, he's so nice. Lily, don't eat it, Claire frowned, but Lily had already taken a big bite. Edward sat on a nearby bench, watching the sisters with a rare softness in his gaze. You take good care of her, he said, no trace of pretense. Claire stayed silent, unsure how to respond. The tipping point came one rainy afternoon. Claire finished work late, without an umbrella, and stood under the office awning, waiting for the downpour to ease. A tall figure approached, holding a large black umbrella. Edward, his shirt soaked at the shoulders, stepped up to shield her. I've been waiting over an hour, he said, his voice hoarse from the cold. Rain dripped from his hair onto his cheek, but he didn't care, just looked at her. Claire froze. Are you insane? Waiting for what? To take you home, Edward answered, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He handed her the umbrella, leaving himself in the rain. You don't like me, I know, but at least don't let me worry. Claire stared at him, feeling shaken for the first time. This man, rich, powerful, cold, was standing in the rain just to give her an umbrella? She took it, her voice softening. I don't need you to worry. I can get home myself. Edward smiled, not pushing. I know you're strong, but I'll keep waiting until you don't find me annoying anymore. He turned away, leaving Claire standing there, gripping the umbrella, her mind a tangled mess. In the days that followed, Claire grew accustomed to Edward's presence, not because she wanted to, but because he was relentless. She felt insecure about her life. An ordinary girl, burdened with debt, living in a rundown apartment. How could she compare to him? She feared getting hurt, feared he was only momentarily intrigued. But each time she saw him, standing in the rain, holding ice cream for Lily, or sending small, unflashy gifts, she wondered, what if he's serious? Edward, meanwhile, wasn't in a rush. He knew Claire wouldn't open up easily, but he was willing to wait. For the first time in his 30 years, his heart beat for someone, and he wasn't about to let her slip away. Chapter 3. Claire softens, a clash of opposites. After more than a week of Edward's pursuit with flowers, coffee cups, and a rain-soaked umbrella, Claire began to feel weary, not from annoyance, but because she didn't know how to handle his persistence. One Friday afternoon, as she left work to pick up Lily from school, her phone rang. An unfamiliar number, but the voice on the other end was unnervingly familiar. Claire, it's me, Edward, he said, his tone deep yet tinged with a rare hesitation. I'd like to invite you to dinner, to thank you for that night. Just dinner, nothing more. Claire frowned, gripping the phone tightly. Thank me for what? I told you that's done. But Edward didn't back down. You don't owe me, but I owe you a proper meal. 7 p.m. I'll send a car, okay? His voice was a strange mix of command and plea, leaving Claire unsure how to refuse. She sighed. Fine, but just this once. At exactly 7, a sleek black Bentley pulled up in front of her rundown apartment complex. Claire stepped out in a simple blue dress, the only decent thing in her closet, and saw Edward leaning against the car, dressed in a rolled-up white shirt and black slacks, looking less distant than usual. He smiled when he saw her, opening the door. You're more beautiful than I imagined, he said sincerely. Claire shot him a glare. Don't flatter me. I'm not used to it. The car took them to Edward's villa, a grand white mansion set on sprawling grounds, surrounded by perfectly trimmed gardens. Claire stepped inside, feeling like she'd entered another world. Polished marble floors, dazzling crystal chandeliers, and a faint scent of sandalwood filled the air. You live here alone? She asked, unable to hide her surprise. Most of the time, yes, Edward replied, leading her to the dining room. The table was set, but there were no servants, just the two of them. I cooked tonight. Hope you don't mind. Claire raised an eyebrow, half believing, half doubting. A CEO like him could cook? But when Edward brought out the first dish, a plate of spaghetti with tomato sauce, She nearly laughed. The pasta was clumped together, the sauce burnt on one side, and the taste indescribable. She took a bite, chewed, then set her fork down. Be honest, you've never cooked before, have you? Edward frowned, clearly displeased with her reaction. I tried. The recipe said it'd be fine. What recipe teaches you to burn tomato sauce? Claire stood up, not waiting for an answer, and marched into the kitchen. I'll do it. Otherwise, we'll both starve tonight. Edward started to protest, but seeing her roll up her sleeves and slip on his apron with ease, he fell silent, sitting nearby to watch. Claire rummaged through the fridge, finding some vegetables, chicken, and a fresh pack of noodles. In just 20 minutes, she whipped up a simple stir-fried noodle dish, fragrant and colorful. She set it in front of Edward, crossing her arms. Eat. Don't waste my effort. Edward looked at the plate, took a bite, then met her gaze, his eyes gleaming. This is good. You're better than I thought. He kept eating, unself-conscious, as if it were the best meal he'd ever had. Claire sat across from him, picking up her fork. Don't be surprised. My life forced me to grow up fast. My mom's sick, my sister needs food, and money's always tight. I learned to cook at 12, not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. Her tone was calm, but Edward caught the hint of bitterness. He stopped eating, looking at her. You're stronger than most people I know. I'm not good with fancy words, but I admire you. Claire gave a faint smile. Admiration doesn't help. I don't need your pity. She looked down, eating again, but the air between them grew tense. Edward set his fork down, his voice deeper. I don't pity you. I just want to understand you. That sparked an argument, not about the food, but their clashing personalities. You're too arrogant, Claire said, pointing at him. You think inviting me here will impress me? You live in this mansion. How could you understand my life? And you're too stubborn, Edward shot back, unflinching. I didn't force you here, but you keep assuming I'm the bad guy. I just want to get closer to you. What's wrong with that? He stood, stepping toward her, his eyes blazing. You think I don't have struggles? What do you know about me? Claire jumped up, facing him head on. Then tell me, you're a CEO, you have money, power? What's your hardship? She nearly shouted, but Edward didn't back down. He took a deep breath, then spoke, his voice dropping to a near whisper. My mom left when I was 10. No explanation, no goodbye. My dad was busy building the company, so I grew up with maids and shareholder meetings. I didn't believe in love, Claire. Not until I met you. He looked straight into her eyes, letting a rare vulnerability show. Claire froze. She hadn't expected a man like Edward to have a past like that. She'd always seen him as someone untouchable, unscathed. But now she glimpsed another side. A boy abandoned. Now a man hiding pain behind a cold exterior. She sat back down, silent for a moment. I didn't know, she said softly. It's fine, Edward replied, sitting closer. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I just want you to understand. I'm not joking when I pursue you. He gave a small smile, trying to lighten the mood. And I'll learn to cook so next time you won't have to step in. Claire laughed, genuinely at ease with him for the first time. If you can cook, I'll believe you can love. They ate on, no more arguing, the distance between them shrinking slightly. In the days that followed, Claire agreed to see Edward a few more times, not because she fully trusted him, but because she was curious. They walked in parks, drank coffee at small cafes, and each time he tried to make her laugh with clumsy remarks or silly mishaps like spilling coffee on himself. But she still kept her guard up. One evening, as he dropped her off, she stood at her door looking at him. Listen, Edward, I'm not the person you think I am. You live in a different world. I'm just an ordinary girl with a mess of problems. Edward stepped closer, his gaze steady. I don't need you to be anyone else. I just want you to be Claire, the one who spilled wine on my shirt, who cooks noodles 100 times better than me. Is that okay? Claire didn't answer, but this time, she didn't turn away immediately. She went inside, closed the door, her heart beating faster than usual. Edward stood outside, smiling, knowing he was getting closer to her heart. Chapter 4. Love blossoms, The first test. After hesitant meetings and unexpected moments of warmth, Claire began to feel a shift in her heart. Edward was no longer the cold, arrogant CEO she once despised. He was the man who patiently brought her coffee every morning, who clumsily burned tomato sauce in the kitchen, who made her laugh with silly remarks he thought were clever. She still kept an invisible wall between them, afraid that opening her heart would plunge her into an abyss she couldn't escape. A place where she, an ordinary girl burdened with family responsibilities, didn't belong. But a cold, rainy day changed everything. Claire fell ill after a long day working in pouring rain. She dragged herself back to her small apartment, shivering with fever, her mind clouded as if trapped in fog. She called in sick, texted a neighbor to watch Lily, and collapsed onto her bed, slipping into a delirious haze. In the middle of the night, she jolted awake to faint sounds in the room. Opening her eyes, she was stunned to see Edward sitting by her bedside, wiping her forehead with a damp cloth. His deep blue eyes filled with worry. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, a few raindrops still clinging to his hair from his rush to get there. "What are you doing here?" Claire rasped, her voice weak but tinged with suspicion. She tried to sit up, but Edward gently pressed her shoulder, stopping her, his warm hand contrasting with the chill of her fever. "Don't move," he said, his tone low but unusually tender. "Lily called me. She panicked when you collapsed and wouldn't wake up no matter how much she called. I couldn't leave you here alone." He nodded toward the table, where a steaming bowl of porridge sat beside a bottle of cold medicine and a box of tissues. "I made porridge, but don't expect much. It's not as good as your noodles." Claire blinked, her mind still foggy. "Lily called you? Why would you?" She couldn't grasp why he was here, in her run-down apartment, in the dead of night. The tiny room with its peeling walls, worn-out sofa, and stack of bills on the table. All of it was alien to someone like Edward. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood, scooped a spoonful of porridge from the bowl, carefully blew it cool, and brought it to her lips. "Eat. You need strength." She wanted to refuse, to tell him to leave so she could manage like always, but her body wouldn't let her. She opened her mouth, letting him feed her spoonful by spoonful, feeling both awkward and strangely comforted. The porridge was bland, slightly burnt, but its warmth spread through her, chasing away the cold gnawing at her bones. Edward sat there watching her intently, his hands, usually signing million-dollar deals, now clumsily holding the spoon, occasionally spilling a bit onto the blanket. When she finished, he set the bowl down, checked her forehead with his cool fingers, and muttered, "Fever's down," exhaling in relief as if he'd just passed a major test. Claire stared at him, at a loss for words for the first time. Edward didn't leave. He pulled the old armchair in the room closer to her bed, sat down, propped his chin on his hand, and let his eyes droop from exhaustion. She meant to tell him to go, but seeing him doze off, a head resting on his arm, breathing steadily, she stayed silent. That night, in her hazy dreams, she felt his hand brush her hair, gently stroking it like an unconscious habit, as if he feared waking her. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the threadbare curtains. Claire woke feeling less weighed down, but what startled her was Edward still there, head slumped against the bed frame, his hand near hers. His shirt was wrinkled, hair mussed, yet his face held an unfamiliar peace, devoid of its usual coldness. Her heart raced, not from fever, but from a feeling she didn't dare name. When Edward opened his eyes and caught her gaze, he gave a sleepy smile, his voice hoarse. "You're okay now?" "Yeah," Claire replied, her voice softening as if afraid to break the quiet. "Thanks, but you didn't have to do this." Edward sat up, rubbing his face to wake himself, then looked her straight in the eye. "I'm not good at pretending, Claire. I'm here because I want to be. I like you. For real." His confession was blunt, unadorned, without a hint of falseness, but it left Claire stunned. She turned away, hiding her flushed cheeks, gripping the blanket's edge for support. "Don't talk nonsense. You're tired. Go home." Edward didn't push. He stood, straightened his shirt, but before leaving he turned back, his tone gentler. "Rest. I'll check on you later. And, if you need anything, call me." He walked out, his steps slow as if reluctant to leave. leaving Claire lying there, still clutching the blanket, her mind a tangled mess. In the days that followed, Claire couldn't deny she was thinking about Edward more. He wasn't a stranger or the arrogant man she'd once hated. He was the one who stood in the rain with an umbrella, who fell asleep by her bed when she was sick, who made her laugh even when she didn't want to. But just as she began to crack open the door to her heart, a storm hit. Olivia Sinclair. One afternoon, as Claire returned to the office after her fever, Olivia swept in like a venomous gust. She wore a striking red dress that hugged her figure, her golden hair perfectly curled, her eyes dripping with disdain. "Claire Bennett, right?" Olivia's voice was saccharine yet cutting, echoing through the silent office. "I hear you're clinging to Edward. Surprising. A nobody like you daring to dream of him?" Claire stood, gripping the files on her desk, forcing herself to stay calm. "I'm not clinging to anyone. He came to me. What's the problem?" Olivia laughed loudly, stepping closer, her heels clicking on the floor. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper loud enough for nearby coworkers to hear. "You think he likes you? He's just toying with you, Claire. Edward wants to prove to the world he can conquer a broke little thing like you. Who do you think you are? A pastime, nothing more. He'll toss you aside when he's bored, like he does with anything beneath him." Her words stabbed at Claire's buried insecurities, the fears she'd always suppressed, that she wasn't good enough, that she didn't belong in Edward's world. She wanted to argue back, but her throat tightened, words failing her. Olivia didn't stop there. She turned to leave but dropped a bombshell. The next day, rumors spread through the office. Claire was suspected of using Edward for money, some even claiming she'd deliberately spilled wine on him at the gala to get attention and climb the social ladder. Co-workers began avoiding her, whispering behind her back. Standing in the hallway, Claire heard the murmurs. "Gold digger. Shameless." Her hands trembling with hurt. Olivia's words echoed in her mind. "He's just toying with you, proving he can conquer you." Doubt crept in. Edward's sincerity, their warm moments, all now felt like a play she'd unwittingly joined. That evening, Edward came to pick her up as usual, a bright smile on his face, unaware of the storm that had ravaged her day. But Claire didn't smile back. She stepped out, her gaze icy, eyes red from tears she'd held back all day. "Why are you chasing me, Edward? To prove something? That you can make a poor girl like me fall, like Olivia said?" Edward frowned, stunned, his smile vanishing. "What did Olivia say? Claire, what are you—" "Don't pretend," Claire interrupted, her voice shaking, tears finally spilling. "Everyone says I'm using you. They think I'm a joke. Did you know, or did you let them think that? If you just wanted to prove you're good at winning, congrats. You did it. Now stop." She stepped closer, facing him, her voice breaking. "I can't take it anymore." Edward's anger flared, his fist clenching, eyes blazing. "Who said that?" "Claire, I never—" But she didn't listen. She turned, walking away quickly, tears streaming down her cheeks, blending into the cold night. "I don't trust you. I don't belong in your world." She left, leaving Edward standing there, his heart aching as if torn apart, bewildered by what had just happened. The next day, at a Blackwell Group shareholder meeting, Olivia appeared beside Edward, smiling as if nothing had happened. She deliberately mentioned Claire in front of everyone. "That assistant sure knows how to get attention, doesn't she? A fun little game." But Edward lost his composure. He stood, his voice icy, cutting through the murmurs in the lavish boardroom. "Enough, Olivia. Claire isn't a user, and I won't let anyone slander her. I'm pursuing her because I want to, not for some game." He locked eyes with Olivia, his gaze sharp as a blade, then turned to the shareholders. "If anyone has a problem with that, feel free to leave." The room fell silent. Olivia paled, unprepared for Edward to publicly defend Claire so fiercely, shattering her scheme. But Claire wasn't there to hear it. She'd taken a few days off, retreating to her apartment, locking the door and holding Lily tight as she cried. Olivia's words haunted her. "He's just toying with you," making her doubt Edward's feelings were real. She pulled away, determined to return to her old life, though her heart ached every time she recalled his hand stroking her hair that night. Edward stood outside her door for hours, gripping the doorknob but not knocking. He knew she needed time, but he also knew he couldn't lose her. Chapter 5. Edward faces his heart. In the days after Claire walked away, Edward felt his life being sucked into an invisible void. He still went to the office, sat through shareholder meetings and signed multi-million-dollar contracts, but it all felt meaningless. Claire didn't reply to his texts, didn't pick up his calls, and when he visited her workplace, her colleagues only shook their heads. She's taken a few days off. He knew she was avoiding him, and that hurt more than any career setback ever could. Edward began to realize how much he missed Claire, not as a fleeting habit, but as a deep, pervasive longing that seeped into every corner of his soul. He missed her laugh, the way she'd burst into hearty giggles when he did something foolish, like spilling coffee on himself just to cheer her up. He missed how she cared for Lily, her eyes lighting up whenever the little girl chattered about school, and how she patiently fed her sister spoonfuls of rice despite her own exhaustion. He missed her resilience, a small, fierce woman who stood tall against struggles he'd never had to face in his gold-paved life. One evening, after a long day at the company, Edward drove to Claire's rundown apartment complex. He stood outside her door under the dim, flickering streetlight, gripping his car keys so tightly his knuckles turned white. He wanted to knock, to explain, to tell her that everything Olivia had said was a lie, but he stopped himself. He remembered the hurt in Claire's eyes that night, her trembling voice saying, "I don't trust you." He knew that no matter what he said now, she wouldn't believe him. She'd built a new wall, higher, thicker, and he didn't know how to tear it down. He stood there for hours from daylight into darkness as a light rain began to fall through his black hair. Neighbors passed by, glancing at him curiously, but he didn't care. He just stared at the weathered wooden door, imagining Claire inside. Maybe holding Lily, maybe crying, or maybe trying to forget him. When the rain grew heavier, he retreated to his car but didn't drive away. He sat there, hands on the steering wheel, head resting against the seat, eyes closed. "I love her," he muttered, admitting it to himself for the first time. Not just a passing fascination, but love, a feeling he'd never thought he could experience. The next morning, Edward walked into the main office of Blackwell Group, where his father, Richard Blackwell, awaited. Richard was a stern man with silver hair and hawk-like eyes. He'd built the conglomerate from nothing, and to him, everything, including Edward's marriage, had to serve the family's interests. As Edward sat down, Richard got straight to the point. "I've spoken with the Sinclairs. Olivia is the perfect choice. An engagement with her will solidify our market position. I want you to arrange an official meeting next week." Edward stayed silent, his hands gripping the chair's arms. He'd heard this 100 times, but today it felt suffocating. He met his father's gaze, his voice low but firm. "I won't do it." Richard frowned, setting his teacup down with a sharp clink of porcelain against wood. "What did you say?" "I'm not getting engaged to Olivia," Edward repeated, standing up, his eyes locked on his father's. "I only want Claire. No one else can replace her." Richard laughed, but it wasn't out of amusement. "Claire? The girl who spilled wine on you at the gala? A penniless administrative assistant? Are you mocking me?" He stood, stepping closer to Edward, his voice dropping into a threatening tone. "I didn't raise you to chase some unworthy girl. This isn't a game, Edward." "I'm not playing," Edward replied, unflinching. "I love her. She doesn't need my money or status, but I need her. You wouldn't understand." He turned to leave, but Richard called after him. "If you choose her, you'll lose everything. Your shares, the CEO seat, everything I've built for you." His father's voice was cold, but Edward didn't stop. He walked out, fists clenched. He wasn't afraid of losing those things. He was only afraid of losing Claire. Back at his villa, Edward sat in his study, the desk lamp casting light on his pensive face. He held his phone, staring at the blank screen. No messages, no calls from Claire. He thought of the days she'd been here, laughing at his burnt pasta, leaving a little note on the table. "Don't burn the kitchen next time, okay?" The sprawling villa now felt oppressively silent without her laughter, without her warm presence. He stood and stepped onto the balcony, gazing at the city's glittering lights below. He wondered what he'd done wrong. He'd pursued her with all the sincerity he had, but she still didn't trust him. Olivia's words, vicious lies he'd overheard from an employee, echoed in his mind. He's just toying with you, proving he can conquer you. He slammed his fist against the railing, anger surging. He didn't blame Claire for doubting. He blamed himself for not shielding her from those lies from the start. But Edward wasn't one to give up. He knew words were useless to Claire now. She'd heard too many whispers, felt too much pain. If he wanted her to believe him, he had to prove it with actions. He sat down, grabbed a pen and paper, rarely used in this digital age, and wrote a short line. I won't talk anymore. I'll show you. He folded the paper, tucked it into his pocket, and stood. He didn't know where to begin, but he knew he couldn't stop. The next day, Edward visited the small flower shop Claire's mother once owned before it went bankrupt, a place he'd quietly bought back weeks ago to help her family. He stepped inside, spoke to the manager, and asked them to keep everything as it was while preparing a special plan. He didn't tell Claire. He wanted her to see it, to feel it, without him needing to explain. He also went to the park where Claire often took Lily, sitting on the old bench, watching kids play. He remembered giving Lily ice cream, Claire's smile when her sister called him nice. He wasn't there to see her. He just wanted to feel her through the places she'd been, as if it would help him understand her better, bring him closer to her. Edward knew this journey wouldn't be easy. Claire wasn't just a girl he wanted to win. She was the woman he loved, the one he wanted to spend his life protecting. He decided to abandon grand words and expensive gifts. He'd use time, patience, and actions to prove his feelings weren't a game. Another evening, he stood outside Claire's door again, rain falling harder than before. He didn't bring an umbrella, letting the water soak his shirt, but he didn't leave. He stared at the door, whispering to himself, I'll wait, Claire. No matter how long it takes, I'll wait. He returned to his car, but in his heart he'd made up his mind. He wouldn't let her slip away forever. Chapter 6. Peak Drama. Misunderstandings and Separation. After days of Claire avoiding him, Edward thought time and patience could mend everything. He was wrong. A bigger storm was brewing, and this time, it wasn't just from Olivia. It came from his own family, who would never accept someone like Claire into their world. That morning, Claire was in her apartment, trying to return to her routine after taking time off. She sat at the kitchen table, holding a cold cup of coffee, her gaze vacant. Lily was at school, leaving the house in a heavy silence. A sudden doorbell jolted her. She stood, opened the door, and froze when she saw an older man with silver hair standing there in an impeccable black suit. Richard Blackwell, Edward's father, was someone she'd never met, but his commanding aura and piercing eyes gave him away instantly. Miss Bennett? Richard's voice was deep and cold, devoid of warmth. Claire nodded, gripping the doorknob tightly. I'm Richard Blackwell, Edward's father. I need to speak with you. Reluctantly, Claire let him in, unease swelling within her. Richard stepped inside, his eyes scanning the tiny apartment with undisguised contempt. The peeling walls, the threadbare sofa, the pile of bills on the table. He didn't sit, standing in the middle of the room, looking at her like a judge facing a defendant. I'll get to the point, Richard said, his tone even but laden with pressure. I want you to stay away from my son. He's being blinded by you, and it's hindering his success. You must understand that you and Edward can never be together. You're not on the same level. Claire stood still, her breath catching. She'd heard similar words from Olivia, but from Edward's father they carried a crushing weight. She forced her voice to stay steady. I'm not forcing him into anything. He came to me. Richard smirked, stepping closer, his gaze cutting through her. You're naive. Edward might think he loves you now, but he'll regret it. One day he'll wake up and see you as his biggest mistake. You have nothing. No money, no status, no lineage. You're a burden dragging him down. If you truly care about him, let him go. Don't let him throw everything away for a moment of impulsiveness. His words sliced into Claire's insecurities like a knife. She wanted to argue, to scream that she didn't need his approval, but deep down she feared he might be right. Her and Edward, two different worlds. Could they last? She lowered her head, hands trembling, saying nothing. Richard watched her for a moment, then turned to leave, placing a check on the table, a sum large enough to clear her family's debts. "Consider it a reward for doing the right thing," he said before shutting the door. Claire stood there staring at the check, tears falling silently. She didn't touch it, but Richard's words planted a new seed of doubt in her heart. She began to wonder if she was truly holding Edward back, if his feelings were strong enough to overcome everything. Meanwhile, Olivia didn't sit idle. After failing to make Edward abandon Claire at the shareholder meeting, she unleashed a bigger, more malicious rumor. An article surfaced online, spreading rapidly among the elite in Claire's workplace. Administrative assistant Claire Bennett, suspected of sabotaging Blackwell Group's major project for personal gain, exploiting relationship with CEO Edward Blackwell. Though baseless, the rumor spread like wildfire, fueled by vicious gossip. Claire's once friendly co-workers now eyed her with suspicion, whispering behind her back, "I knew she wasn't simple. Climbing that high must have taken some scheming." Claire read the article on her phone, her hands shaking so badly she dropped her coffee cup, shattering it on the floor. She hadn't sabotaged anything. She was just a lowly assistant with no access to major projects. But truth didn't matter. The rumor had branded her a schemer in everyone's eyes. She called her boss, voice breaking. "I didn't do anything. You believe me, right?" But his tone was cold. "Claire, take a few more days off. This needs to be sorted out." She hung up, collapsing onto the floor, sobbing into her hands. Richard's words, Olivia's rumors, the isolating stares, it all cornered her into the darkest depths of despair. She wondered if Edward knew, if he'd orchestrated this to punish her for pushing him away. She no longer trusted anyone. Edward learned of the rumor late that day when his assistant burst into his office, panicked, shoving a phone in his face to show the article. He skimmed it, his grip tightening until the screen cracked. "Who did this?" he roared, though he already suspected Olivia. He immediately drove to Claire's place, determined to explain everything. When he arrived, Claire was packing, a small suitcase by the door. She wore a thin coat, her face pale, eyes icy. Edward knocked, calling out loudly, "Claire, it's me. Open the door. We need to talk." Claire opened it but didn't invite him in. She stood there, arms crossed, voice frigid. "Talk about what? That you're not behind the rumor? That you didn't know your father just came here to force me away from you?" Edward froze, stepping closer. "My father? What did he do?" "He said I'm a burden, that I don't deserve you, that you'll regret being with me," Claire replied, her voice trembling but sharp. "And now the world thinks I sabotaged your company. How am I supposed to trust you?" "Claire, I didn't know he came to you," Edward said, his tone urgent. "The rumors Olivia's doing, I'll deal with her. I'm here to protect you, not—" "I don't need love from someone like you," Claire cut in, tears streaming down her face. "You live in a world I'll never fit into. I'm tired, Edward. I don't want to be a joke anymore." She turned, grabbing her suitcase, but Edward caught her hand, holding her back. "Don't go," he said, his voice almost pleading. "I love you, Claire. I'll fix everything. But Claire yanked her hand free, giving him one last look. "Love me? You couldn't protect me from the start. Now it's too late." She walked out, leaving Edward standing there, powerless as she vanished into the rain. Claire left the city that night, taking Lily to a small town where their mother once lived before moving to the city. She rented an old wooden house, starting over, working at a grocery store to support her sister. She didn't take Richard's check. She tore it up before leaving, determined not to be bought. But each night after Lily slept, she sat by the window watching the rain, her heart aching for Edward. She wondered if she'd been too harsh, but convinced herself this was the only way to protect herself. Edward, meanwhile, returned to his villa, too anguished to sleep. He sat in his study, staring at the notes Claire had left behind, gripping a glass of whiskey he didn't drink. He realized he'd lost her, not because he didn't love her enough, but because he hadn't been strong enough to shield her from the start. He'd let Olivia run rampant, let his father interfere, let Claire suffer alone. He slammed his hand on the desk, the glass shattering, blood dripping from his hand. But he didn't care. The next day he faced his father at the office. "I won't get engaged to Olivia," he said, voice icy. "I lost Claire because of you, because of Olivia, because I wasn't strong enough. But I won't let anyone control my life anymore." Richard stared at him, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, but said nothing. Edward turned and walked out of the company, his heart heavy. He didn't know where Claire was, but he knew he couldn't give up. He'd find her, no matter how long it took, to prove he wasn't the weak man she thought he was. Are you still following the story? If you are Claire, you can accept being with Edward. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss other meaningful stories. Chapter 7. Redemption and Pursuit Anew. 3 months had passed since Claire left the city, taking Lily with her to the small town of Willow Creek, where their mother once lived before moving to the urban sprawl. Nestled between golden barley fields and lush pine forests, the town offered the peace Claire hoped would heal her broken heart. She worked at a grocery store, earning enough to support Lily and send money to their mother, still hospitalized in the city under the care of a distant relative. Claire tried to rebuild her life, but each night, as moonlight streamed through the window, she thought of Edward, his eyes as she walked away, his hand stroking her hair the night she was sick. She told herself it was the past, but her heart refused to let go. Meanwhile, Edward was no longer the powerful CEO of Blackwell Group. After his confrontation with his father, he relinquished everything: the CEO seat, his shares, the lavish villa that had once been his home. He didn't need them anymore, not without Claire to fill the void in his life. He spent weeks, then months, searching for her, asking friends, colleagues, hiring investigators. Finally, he uncovered Willow Creek, a remote place he'd never heard of, but where he knew Claire was hiding. One autumn morning, as golden leaves blanketed the streets of Willow Creek, Claire stepped out of the grocery store after her shift, carrying a bag of vegetables for dinner. She froze when she saw a familiar figure standing under a blazing red maple tree. Edward, no longer in expensive suits or flanked by a sleek car, wore a simple gray sweater and faded jeans, holding a small bunch of wildflowers. He'd lost weight, his hair grown longer, but those deep blue eyes still gazed at her with unwavering resolve. "Claire," he called, his voice hoarse, stepping closer but halting when she stepped back. "I've been looking for you." Claire gripped her bag tightly, a storm of emotions surging within: anger, pain, and something she didn't dare acknowledge. "What are you doing here? I told you, we're done." Edward lowered his head, clutching the flowers so hard a few stems snapped. "I know you don't want to see me, but I can't live without trying again. I was wrong not to protect you from the start. I'm here to make it right, not with words, but with everything I have." Claire turned away, her voice cold. "You don't need to do anything. Go back." She walked past him, but Edward didn't follow. He stood there watching her disappear, then quietly began his plan. The next day, Edward visited the small flower shop at the edge of town, the one Claire's mother had once owned, shuttered long ago after bankruptcy when her illness made it impossible to run. He met Martha, the former manager and a friend of Claire's mother, now struggling to reopen it with meager savings. Edward offered to buy the shop, not to own it, but to revive it. He handed over a substantial sum, asking Martha to keep his identity secret. "I'm doing this for someone," he told her, his gaze distant. He started working at the shop, learning to trim flowers, wrap bouquets, water plants, tasks a CEO like him had never imagined. His hands, once used for signing contracts, were now dirt-streaked, his gray sweater stained with water, but he didn't complain. He lived in a rented room nearby, abandoning all luxury to immerse himself in the town's simple life, inching closer to Claire each day. Claire discovered this 2 weeks later, passing by the shop to buy daisies for Lily. She froze when she saw Edward behind the counter, scissors in hand, sweat rolling down his forehead. He looked up, caught her eye, and gave a faint smile. "Hi, want some flowers?" "What are you doing here?" Claire demanded, her voice trembling with shock and anger. "This shop? Why are you here?" Edward set the scissors down, stepping out from the counter, his tone low. "It used to be your mom's. I know it went bankrupt because she couldn't keep it going while sick. I bought it back from Martha, to keep it alive for you. Claire stepped back, clutching her bag. You had no right to touch my family's things. You think this will make me forgive you? I don't expect you to forgive me right away, Edward replied, his eyes earnest. I just want to be near you, even a little. If you don't want to see me, I'll stay out of your way. But I'm not leaving this town. Claire turned and walked off, her heart in turmoil. She didn't know what to do with his presence. A man who'd once been everything to her, now reappearing as part of the world she was trying to rebuild. In the weeks that followed, Edward settled into Willow Creek, working at the flower shop and slowly becoming part of the town. He didn't pressure Claire to see him, didn't send flowers or coffee like before, but quietly wove himself into her life in the simplest ways. He fixed Martha's leaking roof, helped Lily pick pine cones in the park when she passed by, and silently sent fresh bouquets to the grocery store where Claire worked. Unsigned, though she knew they were from him. One afternoon, as Claire finished her shift, she saw Edward outside the store, holding a small wooden box. He approached, handing it to her, his voice gentle. Open it. Claire frowned but complied. Inside were legal papers. Ownership of the flower shop transferred to her name. A small note accompanied it, in Edward's handwriting. You love flowers every morning. I want you to have them forever. She looked up at him, tears welling. Why are you doing this? Edward stepped closer, not touching her. Because I love you, Claire. I gave up the company, my father, everything that wasn't you. I don't need money or power. I need you. I'm here to prove that, whether you accept me or not. Claire lowered her head, hands trembling around the box. She felt the sincerity in his voice, his eyes every day he lived simply beside her. But fear still clung to her. Fear of their differences. Fear he'd regret it one day, as his father had warned. She whispered, You don't understand, Edward. We're too different. You're giving up everything now. But what about later? Edward shook his head, his voice resolute. I won't regret it. My world means nothing without you. I'll prove it. Not today, but every day, every month, every year. That night, Claire sat in her wooden house, staring at the shop's papers, overwhelmed with emotion. Lily came over, hugging her from behind. Sis, Edward's really nice. Why don't you give him a chance? The innocent question made Claire sob. She held Lily tighter, unable to answer. The next day, Claire went to the flower shop, seeking Edward for the first time. He was wrapping a bouquet of roses, looking up as she entered, his eyes lighting up. Claire, are you serious, she asked, her voice soft but clear, that you won't regret it? Absolutely, Edward replied, stepping out from the counter to face her. I've never been more certain of anything. Claire took a deep breath, then stepped forward, hugging him. A brief embrace, but enough to mend some of the wounds between them. I'm not promising it'll be easy to forgive, she whispered, but I'll try. Edward held her tightly, tears falling for the first time in years. Thank you. But in Claire's heart, fear lingered. Fear that their differences might one day tear them apart again. She didn't voice it, just silently held his hand, hoping time would erase that dread. Chapter 8. The Fated Proposal. The grand opening of the flower shop in Willow Creek arrived on a radiant autumn morning. Petals meticulously arranged by Edward and Martha adorned the storefront. Vibrant red roses, pristine white daisies, and gentle purple lavender. The usually tranquil town buzzed with life as locals gathered, curious about the revival of the shop that had once been Claire's mother's pride. Claire stood inside, dressed in her simple blue dress, clutching a bouquet of daisies Lily had picked for her that morning. She looked around, her heart swirling with mixed emotions, joy at the shop's rebirth and the lingering fear of her future with Edward. Edward stood nearby, sleeves rolled up on his white shirt, trimming flowers and assisting Martha with a customer's bouquet. He'd changed so much since arriving in Willow Creek, no longer the cold CEO in an expensive suit, but a humble man willing to get his hands dirty to be near her. Over the past months, he'd proven his love through actions, working at the shop, living in a modest rented room, and patiently waiting for her to open her heart. Claire felt it, but the fear of their differences, her scarred past and the world he once belonged to, still held her back. The opening went smoothly. Townsfolk visited, chatting and laughing, praising the fresh flowers and the shop's cozy warmth. Lily darted around, clutching a sunflower, beaming as she boasted to everyone, "My sister owns this place." Claire smiled, but her eyes occasionally flicked to Edward, who worked quietly yet always kept her in his sight. As dusk fell, the shop emptied out. Claire stepped into the small garden behind the store, a space Edward had planted with flower beds for her to enjoy each morning, just as he'd promised in his note. She stood there, breathing in the lavender scent, grappling with the final fear in her heart. Did she have the courage to move past her history and believe their love could bridge their differences? Edward appeared behind her, his footsteps soft on the grass. He didn't speak at first, just stood beside her, hands in his pockets, his gaze tender. "What do you think?" he asked, his voice warm and low. "The shop, it's yours just like you wanted." Claire turned to him, her eyes shimmering. "It's more beautiful than I imagined." "Thank you, Edward, but I'm still scared. Scared that one day we won't overcome these differences." Edward stepped forward, pulling a small black velvet box from his pocket. Claire's heart pounded as he knelt before her in the fragrant garden, the golden sunset casting a glow on his face. He opened the box, revealing a simple silver ring, unpretentious yet sparkling in the light. "Claire," he began, his voice trembling but resolute, "I started chasing you with a lie. That pretend night at the gala. But now I know you're my only truth. I gave up everything to be here with you, and I haven't regretted a single second. Claire Bennett, will you marry me?" Claire froze, hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. His proposal wasn't flowery or long-winded, but every word carved itself into her heart. She looked into his eyes, once cold, now brimming with love and sincerity. She remembered the months he'd stood in the rain for her, the days he'd quietly worked at the shop, the times he'd patiently waited for her trust. Yet fear lingered, fear that her past, their disparities, might one day ruin everything. Edward stayed on one knee, waiting in silence, his eyes never leaving hers. Claire took a deep breath, confronting her last fear. She thought of her mother, still in the hospital, who'd always taught her that true love required courage. She thought of Lily, the days she'd fought to protect her sister, and Edward, who'd abandoned his world to step into hers. She realized that if he hadn't given up after everything, she couldn't either. She nodded, her voice choked but clear. "If you won't give up, then neither will I." Tears fell harder, but this time from joy. Edward smiled, tears rolling down his own face. The second time in his life he'd cried, both for her. He stood, slipping the ring onto her finger with trembling hands. It fit perfectly, as if made for her. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight amid the flowers, the scents of lavender and roses swirling around them. Claire looked up, met his eyes, and stood on her toes to kiss him. Their kiss wasn't rushed or fiery, but gentle and profound, a promise to face all challenges together. Clapping erupted behind them. Lily, Martha, and a few townsfolk had quietly gathered.